Hi. In this lesson, we're going to get the teacups rattling on the shelves. We're going to have a look at a British earthquake, how our understanding of seismic events actually applies to a far more local context than other earthquakes we're going to be looking at. And for this, we're going to study one particular earthquake that occurred in a place called Market Rasen in Lincolnshire back in 2008. You're going to see the scientific calculator for this lesson and the study task sheet that accompanies it. Okay, let's go. Now, this is a study task, so we've got a series of questions here based around this piece of data. We can see that we've got a map of the Mercalli intensities of this particular earthquake. So you can see this earthquake was felt across much of northern England, Midlands, and most of Wales. There's a series of questions then that gets you working through this. Okay, answer those questions on your sheet, see what you can come up with. I'd also like you to calculate the actual magnitude of this earthquake. This is an equation that you can be asked to solve in your A-level exam, although you wouldn't be expected to remember it. But you do need to be able to apply it. Now, the figure M0 is the seismic moment, and that varies from earthquake to earthquake. For this particular earthquake, the seismic moment is 10 to the power of 23.85. You need to substitute that into the equation and calculate the moment magnitude. The one thing you need to be really careful of is the sequence of calculation. Okay, you've got to remember BIDMAS. As always, my recommendation is you break this equation down and you do it one bit at a time. Don't try and plug it all into the calculator just so you can press equals once. Do it stage by stage and you'll get the right answer. Remember as well, there's a checking strategy for this. Does your answer make sense? There's going to be a limited range of answers that are possible for the magnitude of an earthquake like this in Britain. And if you get an answer outside what you'd expect, you need to go back and check. As well as the questions that are on your sheet, there is a bonus question, and that's really asking what should be done about this. If we get earthquakes like the Market Rasen earthquake, what's the answer? What should we do in the UK about the risk of seismic hazards that we face? Once you've had a go at those questions, watch the video of the news report on this Market Rasen earthquake, so you can see the devastating effects of this particular event. So, press pause on the video now, work out those questions, and watch that video. Okay then, let's have a look at some answers to these questions so we can find out more about this particular seismic event. Question A then, from each of these descriptions, work out the Mercalli intensity value that was experienced here. 3, 4 or 5. This is really just asking you to rank the how bad each of these effects were. So wardrobe stores starting to rattle violently, that's going to be a 4. Noise like a lorry going past is a 3. And the terrifying noise with cracks in the garage and the chimneys, that's a 5. I then ask you to draw in the isoseismal line to show the Mercalli intensity of 4. So really what we're looking to do here is to draw a line separating out the 3s and the 4s. So if we draw that in, there we go. Okay. One mark for getting that mostly right. The second mark is for that little kink in the line there you can see in around Wales, or around North Wales. The focus of this particular earthquake was 18.6 kilometres below the surface, quite deep for a British earthquake. It's just how the intensity at the epicenter might have been different. The focus had been deeper, and it would have been less. The wave energy would be dissipated by the time it gets to the surface, the further it travels. And then two reasons why we get different intensity values at places that are the same distance from the epicenter. Two things really to go at here are the local ground conditions. So, for example, if you have an area that's built on soft, unconsolidated sediment, that's going to have a higher intensity than if you have an area that's built directly on bedrock. Also, the quality of buildings, how tall the buildings are, how much building standards are applied. You can't here talk about distance, size, or depth because they're all the same for this earthquake. Okay, the calculation. It's another of these equations that can look intimidating at the start, but actually is pretty straightforward. So let's, as I said, substitute in values one by one. So the first thing I want to do is put in my moment, my seismic moment into the equation. Now the mathematicians will tell you log to the base 10 of 10 to the power of anything is the same as what that power is. So the magnitude here is 2/3 times 23.85, take away 10.7. Remember our BIDMAS, always remember our BIDMAS. We have now a value of 15.9 minus 10.7, and that gives us a moment magnitude of 5.2, which is a reasonable answer. A British earthquake isn't going to be have a massive magnitude, but it has to be significant enough that it did cause a little bit of damage. So, we do have several hundred earthquakes in Britain each year, but they pose very little risk. They're not very big. Small magnitudes, lower intensities, so there's less risk of building collapse, which is really the main hazard that we're likely to face from these. We're thousands of kilometres from a plate boundary, not in an active fault zone. Earthquakes that we have, we get subsidence of old mine workings, for example, sorting out of crustal stresses after glaciation, but they're not tectonic, so they're not going to be particularly large. There are some other reasons as well, for example, high building standards. The bonus question then, I'm going to leave to you. Okay, what do you think government should do about this level of hazard, and us as individuals? What preparations should we make to deal with seismic hazards? I'd be interested to know what you think about that. What I'd like you to do is be prepared to discuss that when I see you later on. Okay. So, as we see our conclusions here in Lincolnshire dialect, let's just sort that out. As the sun sets over Market Rasen, we can see Britain does experience seismic hazards, but they're low level. They're not significant, they're not very frequent, and they're certainly not very large. But they still do pose some degree of risk. What do you think our response should be to that level of hazard? We need to look at some more seismic events, but that's going to be for possibly of a greater degree. And also we need to consider other geohazards that Britain is subject to. But those are subjects for other lessons. I'll see you then.